Now, what people will normally say is after problem, the next thing is solution. What the best sales decks, the best stories, the best pitches actually do is actually paint a picture of what success looks like, what winning looks like, and what losing looks like, right? So in many movies, it will say, oh, there's a tsunami coming, and if it comes, half the earth is going to die. Or when Blofeld has his new weapon in James Bond, he's going to blow up the moon, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So what losing looks like. They also talk about what winning looks like, right? Often in James Bond, like he ends up with a woman somewhere on a beach or a yacht, for example, right? Painting a picture of the promised land is very important. If you solve that problem, if you come out on top, if you win, if you succeed, then what does the ideal state look like? What is the promised land? And why that's important is when you are talking to someone and pitching someone, and he only sees the solution and the work he has to do, or I need to do integration or implementation, or I need to download this app, or I need to pay, or whatever, before I actually figure out why would I do this? What would success look like? They might screw up. The only way you do that is you start with the promised land. You start with this vision of what success looks like. It's very important before you go into problem to actually talk about that promised land and paint that picture, right? Mr. Customer, the world is changing. The world now looks like this. That creates this problem for you. Do you recognize it? Yes, I recognize that. Wouldn't it be amazing if, bang, imagine that you could have that, right? Because then he'll say, yes, 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 I want that. That's what I want, right? And so that's why this is an important question, right? And so the two examples are doing that quite nicely, right? If you look at how Xenium did that, right? It just talked about, again, just building it up, this beautiful smile. Now imagine a product that gives you that beautiful smile, but without spending a fortune, without pain, without draining your time at a dentist or a clinic. Imagine you could have a product that improves your smile and maintains it and makes it white and actually builds up or adds to you being more confident, right? And imagine that everyone on Instagram sees you smile with impact, right? So that's how hopefully talking to a millennial, which is their target customer, you'll be like, wow, I want that. And one smart way of doing this, guys, is just to say, normally, one thing that you have to do anyway as part of product management and product marketing is think about what are my features? What are my benefits? But if I post these benefits as just an outcome of my features after the fact, people might resist. But when I actually re-engineer that and first talk about my value, but without saying it's my value, just say, this is what people want nowadays. So you're actually building up, you're creating that demand, right? There is a scene where Bond will go and visit Q and he'll get access to the magic gifts, right? And every time he'll have different gadgets like mobile phone, exploding pen, like briefcase, obviously the car, always there's this magic gift, right? And so in a way, that is the next question that you're gonna ask yourself is, how does your customer, how are you taking that customer to that ideal state? As they say, you have to name it to claim it. And so naming that category is very important. Specifically in business to business, what the folks at Play Bigger are saying is that your category name should almost be a line item on the P&L of your customer, right? At his rows of expenses, there should be experience management platform, cloud CRM, enterprise messaging for Slack. These are cost line items. So you have to come up with a very small or short name or description that describes your category. Enter Xenium, the first company that offers a complete range of smile cosmetics. Now that's interesting. Smile cosmetics is what they picked as their category name. And they did that for a reason, by the way, and we were closely part of the whole discussion. And they basically wanted to say is, if we do say anything that is health or that is dental or that is seen as surgical or whatever, that's not what we want to be. We want to be more a lifestyle brand. So we want to have to do with fashion, with looking good. So cosmetics. We didn't want to say teeth because it's very narrow, but smile, right? When they started, they only had invisible braces, but they knew that they wanted to do more, right? So that's why they said, to start with, we offer invisible braces at an affordable price with easy financing options through a fast online process. Again, these are the magic gifts, right? What they offer is low price, easy financing, online process, large network of dentists, engaging technology, You can connect with an app, so it's a much more digital experience versus the old school stuff of doing things. And after your smile transformation is complete, we'll even start offering you retainers and oral care and teeth whitening, which they've since done. If you go to their website, it's all about smile. Every email talks about smiling more. They've been very consistent, both internally and externally, as well as in executing on their product strategy around owning this category and focusing on these magic gifts, right? And they've done that beautifully well. The best companies spend 66%, 75% in that zone of the real estate, of the story, in showing how incredibly well they know their customer and the customer's environment, in selling the problem. Every good story is about the transformation from some state to a new state, a transformation, right? And so the last part, almost as the final punchline of your narrative, should be about your ability to explain how you transform the life of your customer. Like earlier on, at the more micro level, we said, like, what are the specific, benefits that you'll get, and then the magic gifts. But ultimately, what is that end state, right? At the more macro level, in more detail, what features and magic gifts they offered. But now, as a last line again, they're basically saying, Xenium gives you a smile that brightens up the room or your feet. You show the world your most confident, optimistic self. Xenium helps you smile more. That's the transformation, right? You're now confident, right? You're now optimistic. You're now able to smile more and be more confident, right? And so that is the transformation. I like theirs because it's very short. The interesting thing is, don't think that this is the story that is on your website as is. I work with a lot of our portfolio companies that I serve in quite a few boards. Whenever I speak with people and they say, oh, what do you do? I'm an investor. Like, what do you invest in? All these companies. Oh, give me an example. And I talk about a company. I'll try and lead with this. I will never say, oh, Xenium, oh, it's invisible braces. I'll try and tell the story in this way, because I want to make sure that those stories are versatile enough that my grandma can understand it, right? If I'm at a party and I run into my grandma and she asks me about a company, I want to be able to say it in words that she can understand. As you can see in both of these stories, there is as little jargon as possible, as little complexity as possible, right? You also want to be able to use it with multiple customers or buyers, right? Depending on your product, or multiple times of consumers. This story you can pitch to a CXO, you can pitch to a CMO or a CTO or whatever. Now, the reality is, I've seen companies fail by doing this and then fail to link up their product. I've seen companies work on this. They get that story, but then there's a big gap between that story and the reality of how that product is structured. Then it falls apart. So you have to be able to do that as the lead in. But then when you're sitting in a room with a CMO, for example, chief marketing officer, a VP of marketing, and a digital marketeer, for example, you want to start with this, but then you want to go to the next level and go deeper into these magic gifts. What is your platform? What is the technology? How is it unique? What are different product features? How do they work together? How do I implement it? All of that needs to tie into your story, right? It cannot be, as I mentioned earlier, just veneer, right? Now, lastly, you want to be able to summarize this in kind of like a shorter 30-second. You want to think about your tagline, for example, for Xenium is, we help Asia smile more. It's always about smiling more, right? And it ties in very closely to that piece. Lastly, people ask me, how do you use it? I personally feel that it could be the start of your customer presentation. And then after this, you go detail into your product and your pricing and the rest, but you lead with this bigger vision. You want to pitch to employees, you want to have an employee pitch deck. Imagine Twitter going out to a new employee and luring them from Google or Facebook and say, do you want to work for my company? What do you do? We allow people to send messages 140 characters. Like, who's going to join? No one. But Twitter went out like, everyone can be their own news, can write their own headlines. We can change the world by instant communication. We can broadcast to the world. They had this big vision, right? So even in your employee pitch deck, you want to be speaking like that. And then lastly, obviously in your investor deck, to some extent, talk about the market, not in the boring slide, oh, the market is this big, blah, blah, blah. You want to do that in your pitch deck as well, but maybe not lead with it because it doesn't create that emotional connection. But when you show that you understand your customer, you understand the market that he operates in his world or her world, and then you go through this entire piece, it sets the stage for a much broader, more strategic conversation potentially, and it shows that you truly have a unique insight. And hence you want to be able to use this with your customer, with your employee, and your investor pitch deck. This is a company in a portfolio called Insider, and they not completely, but broadly follow this, right? And so they describe that in our digital world, growth is king, right? They say back in the days, talk about 15 years ago, hardware and infrastructure was the biggest line item on the P&L, was the biggest cost if you wanted to build a startup or if you wanted to go digital. Then public cloud came, AWS came in the early days, and those costs went down, and then everything was about the war for talent. But now, if you look, the biggest cost item for people when they're building a startup or a digital business is often growth. It's customer acquisition cost, right? It's all about customer acquisition cost. But too many marketing dollars are spent on the wrong customers, right? This is the impact. This is the problem. They spend on customers that don't buy, that don't spend, that don't come back. And that's the problem, right? So the first slide was very clear. Market shift. 2, problem. 3, talk about current solutions in the market that don't work. This is about the why now. Like if there is no clear reason why now and why a solution is needed, it's not going to fly, right? So they described about how the current solutions in the market are even the big marketing clouds, Adobe, Salesforce. Those are complex and clunky and costly, and see how they almost market the problem there, right? This is very memorable, complex, clunky, and costly. And on the other hand, you had this massive landscape, all these point solutions. And guess what? Integrating is a nightmare. Data is a nightmare. Managing all these vendors, right? What if there was something in the middle? Promised land. Imagine that you could have a single platform to manage your full growth stack across acquisition, activation, retention, and revenue. Imagine that platform was very rich from an AI and machine learning perspective. So you can do all these smart things around prediction and segmentation, right? And what if that platform was much easier, where the data was unified so that it was easier to implement and simpler to use and would deliver more ROI? And then they said, please meet Insider, the first integrated growth management platform, right? So those are the first slides of their pitch deck, right? Then they go into what does the product look like and how we're doing and our metrics and our MRR and blah, 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 right? But this is how they start. And so they tie it into this macroeconomic shift. So you see they loosely follow the format. You don't have to go by the letter, but you get the point of it, right?